Once again, Season 6 seems to be a season of promise and tensions are getting higher across the world of Ice and Fire. After last week's fantastic ending, hopes were set pretty high for something to happen this episode with the faith in the crown and however much other things we have to cover. This episode was shorter than the previous two, but I feel that the time was spent wisely nonetheless. I'm pretty dragged out as I've been sorting out things for this live stream I just did. Check that out on Twitch if you want. And the next Harry Potter review that's coming up, so don't expect this review to be an absolute mastery of criticism, as I did enjoy this episode a lot and I apologise if it seems a little rushed. Once again, spoilers will follow from here on in, so you have been warned to skip over to another video now if you wish.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
The episode begins where the last episode left us and Bran sees the history of Westeros before his eyes. This sequence was rather baffling as it's threw all of the images at us so quickly. I hope it has some relevance to the overarching story, as I would rather not be reminded of what happened previously on the show like a whiny child who always says, "I don't get it," because they were too busy playing Angry Birds on their iPhones. There are loads of flashes between ice, the White Walkers, and fire, the dragons and the wildfire. We even see the Mad King commanding for all of them to be burned, presumably from Robert's rebellion, considering Jaime comes in and slays him here too. There's probably going to be a lot more in this story that relates back to the past in some way, probably the reveal of Jon Snow's parents if the fan base has anything to say about it. There's this brilliant moment where all seems hopeless for Mira as she breaks down crying. The shot is so blurry with the blizzard and grey tones that are put in there as well, and I would really not want to be in her shoes right now. I initially thought the rider that came to Bran and Mira's rescue was Cold Hands, but it is very much disputed as to whether or not Cold Hands is Benjen Stark, so my suspicions could have been true. The hype train is just filling to the brim with excitement and characters now. That fucking fiery ball and chain thing is super badass. I think the showrunners played their cards well here, not identifying who their saviour is until further towards the end of the episode, teasing book fans hard by doing this. I kind of recognised the face behind the hood, but I didn't jump to conclusions until the show revealed it to me later in the episode. Sam and Gilly's part was surprisingly interesting. Granted, Gilly still appears far too boisterous and confident for her own good, and I began to fear the worst as the two have an awkwardly uninteresting conversation within the carriage. But then suddenly this absolutely jaw-dropping shot of Horn Hill emerges and I felt a tingling of excitement surge from within me. It's just so gorgeous. We immediately establish the tyranny of Randyll Tarly when Sam's sister complains about the man she is set to wed. The mother of the house does, however, uphold very hospitable standards and welcomes Gilly regardless of where she's from. As we know, Randyll will not like it one bit if the truth gets out about her origin. The sets are gorgeous and I really liked how Sam's sister would happily teach Gilly the ways of Westerosi fashion. Gilly then comes out all glittered up like a high school prom queen and we see this fantastic dinner sequence where Randyll Tarly appears for the first time in the show. The silence of the scene is absolutely deafening as it's very obvious who rules the house. His face is of pure loathing towards his son and this bursts out after Sam is offered some more bread. The constant shots of him looking completely disinterested and irritated as the conversations take place creates a very uncomfortable atmosphere, which reaches even bigger heights when his daughter is silenced because the thought of Randyll changing his ways is just something that is not going to happen. It soon becomes even more apparent that Sam's brother Dickon has been brainwashed and led to think the way his father thinks when he laughs at the idea of the White Walkers. The awkwardness and tensions rise more so when Gilly stands up to Randyll Tarly, an obviously unwise move. Once again, I think this is very out of character for her, but I don't really know where her character arc is going and it may make sense later on. He then goes on to completely disregard her as a human being, but chooses to punish his son as opposed to punishing Gilly. However, this choice for her to stay may not have guaranteed her safety, and I feared for what might happen would they had stayed. However, their decision to leave confuses me slightly, as I have no idea where else in Westeros would accept Gilly and her kids so lightly and would receive the love and care of Sam's mother. He goes and steals that sword as well. What on God's earth is he going to do with that? Post it to the Night's Watch? In Braavos, I didn't quite expect this theatre show to have a part 2 so that Arya can catch up on all the things she's missed while she's been away from Westeros, but also from the perspective of the performers, which, as we know, is very inaccurately portrayed. I find it very odd that Arya was persuaded not to kill the actress based on her emotional performance. I know Arya gives her 2 cents on this later on, but it's just strange that she swayed over just because of good acting. The music in the Braavos segments with the faceless men is really cool. I've always admired how strange and unnerving it is. I think it's really interesting watching Arya as she pours the poison and contends with her inner conflict, deciding whether what she's doing makes her any worse than those treacherous characters depicted on stage. The name Mercy fits better into the story now after we see Arya knock the poison from the lady's hands and exposes the true envy of Bianca at the end of the scene. I found out actually the director Isambaro is played by Richard E. Grant. I never would have guessed. I was a tad suspicious last week, but now he had more to say this week, I decided to look it up and it is him. He gives out a fine and brief performance as the director and Tywin Lannister. As soon as Arya gives the whole game away, the faceless men start taking action. And so does she. Goodness knows where this is going to be leading to, but holy shit, the dude's actually cutting people's faces off. That's so fucked.
Shame.
He also mentions not letting her suffer, so I presume Arya is either not going to last much longer with the faceless men, but she also might not last longer in her life either. Tensions are building in Braavos. It's just a shame we didn't learn more about the faceless men as I would have liked, and I feel now that there wasn't much point in her taking this path in the show whatsoever. There's a really great, you'll have to wait until next week, shot of Arya blowing out the candle as well. I'm quite excited to see her escape or just outright take over. Back in King's Landing, I find it interesting watching the High Sparrow indoctrinating the young to see his way. I do however feel a bit suspicious about Margaery's dedication to the faith considering what we saw last week. Perhaps it's all a Tyrell ploy that Margaery is performing independently. Speaking of the Tyrells, fuck me, Mace's helmet is awesome and hilarious at the same time. He literally looks like the traditional medieval super knight that makes those feathers look so laughable. And the fact that nobody bothers to respond to his supposedly inspirational speech either. His army looks pretty fucking awesome though, as does Jaime atop his horse. This whole sequence was very tense but came to a very interesting conclusion in that the faith has now taken the king and queen of the entire realm and have them under their control for the sake of the faith taking over. It also reminds me of the European witch hunts wherein which those that had sinned can be atoned if they place the blame on another, which is what Margaery does as a compromise so that no violence takes place and her freedom is provided for her. The applause from the crowd shows us the defeat of the crown and that the new way is the only way now that the children have been brainwashed to do the faith's bidding, or so we think. Tommen even quotes the High Sparrow in the opening of his speech. The music works really well in this scene too, as it seems very celebratory, but there are some very jarring notes placed in there to show that this conflict is far from over. This is getting very interesting. I know many will complain that this story has been a bit of an anti-climax, but Jaime being removed entirely from the Kingsguard and now basically being sent on the path he's on in the books makes me very interested to see where his story goes. Nikolai's performance and desperation comes through in this chat with his sister. Both performers bounce off each other very well, and it's great watching them argue and worry about the events to come. And then the Freys make an appearance. Hooray! Fuck me, David Bradley's performance is phenomenal as always.
They're laughing at us all across the Riverlands, right down to King's Landing. They're laughing at us. I hear it in my sleep.
He's such a menace and it's so great seeing him back, just as dangerous and twisted as we left him. But now he's angry with the reputation the Freys have in the aftermath of the Red Wedding. I can already hear that fucking hype train whistle blowing as the scene took place. We could potentially be seeing some hostages and sieges taking place soon too, that'd be really cool. North of the Wall we have our big revelation about Benjen being back, who we haven't seen since series 1. I can't wait to find out what he's been doing all this time and figure out what the ice sword that was shoved inside him will do to his body as time goes by. Granted, the children of the forest patched him up, but I'm hoping there's more to this wound than meets the eye. I'm firstly happy they didn't change the actor like they have done before in this show, but also I'm very interested in what on earth he has to tell of his misadventures since we last saw him. He certainly knows a lot about the Three-Eyed Raven and warging, so I presume he's aiming to get Bran all up to scratch on being the new all-seeing, all-knowing bloke that Bloodraven was. Daenerys' section was pretty nice to watch too. For some reason, a gust of wind indicates to her that a dragon's lurking around somewhere, and so it magically appears flying overhead with her on her back, and fuck me, it's big now. Her speech that ends the episode is delivered amazingly. There's some fantastic acting from Emilia here that rounds off the episode really well, even if she's speaking entirely in Dothraki. It's very cool as it reinforces her position as a leader now, and a fierce one at that. It's her way or the hard way, and she's exerting that authority now she knows what she's doing. So, did it suck? Apart from a few annoyances, this episode was fantastic. Some of the episode's plot lines kind of twist the expectation of the viewer on their heads, such as the lack of a battle at the Sept and Arya not following the direct orders of those of the Faceless Men. This is really great because it's making us anticipate something even bigger as the series goes on. Thanks for stopping by, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Here are the outtakes. Tosser. I kind of recognised the face behind the hood, but I didn't jump to conclusions But then suddenly this absolutely jaw-dropping blimey. However, their decision to leave does slightly confuse me. Slightly, what did I even just say? I find it very odd that Arya was persuaded deciding. For some reason a gust of vindicates. Her speech that ends the episode is delivered, well, my delivery is awful, but you know, you can just tell. Fuck me, David Bradley's performance is fucking fucked.